Hello! So I've decided that every time I knit a historical knitting pattern, I'm going to make a video just dedicated to that pattern because I think it's important to share your notes on this kind of a thing for, to document your work. And a couple years ago, I knit a pattern for a Sontag. I don't remember what the year was. It's from the 1800s. And when I had started to work on that project, I looked up videos on YouTube of the pattern to see if anybody had made it before, to try to get like extra knowledge and notes and stuff. And I did find a couple people it was super helpful to have those videos to reference. So I ended up making my own video on my Sontag and I put that video up. Please don't go watch it. It's not good. I'm gonna try to remake it this year. But I made another historical knitting project. I made a pair of gloves and I want to just dedicate this video to that and go over the pattern, my pattern. I will probably write up my notes into like an adapted pattern and I'll put it up for free on my Patreon if anybody wants to make them too, because it'll probably just be easier to read my pattern than the old one. But I'll provide the old one too if you're curious. And I'm going to have it up on screen a lot in this video. So, yeah, so let's just get into it. I feel like this is going to be a little bit lengthy. First of all, here's one of the gloves. I'm going to be honest, at the time of filming this, I have not finished seaming the other glove, but I'm going to do that later. So, all of the shots that you're seeing of the finished gloves are not right now. So I have to do it like this. Here's one of the gloves. So these gloves are from, well, here's the full title that I found on Ravelry. There is a Ravelry page for this book specifically and this pattern specifically. And there's also somebody's pattern, like they also rewrote the pattern. Hold on, I should give them credit too. I didn't use their pattern really, but I did reference it. Oh, copyright. Oh, I can't. Here it is. Copyright this person. I did not use their pattern, but I looked at it just to cross-reference basically. I have notes written and I also have the pattern pulled up over here, so I'm going to be looking over this way. The full title that the Ravelry page gave is Piecework Magazine presents a facsimile edition of Weldon's Practical Needlework Volume 1 by Piecework Magazine. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do much research. I don't know what Piecework Magazine is. They may have republished this. I think the original title is Weldon's Practical Needlework Series Volume 1. Here's the actual pattern itself. The title is just Ladies Mittens with Thumb. I think it's very interesting that back then they used to call these mittens. So I'm going to go through the pattern and also go through my own pattern. Also, I want to mention that these are knit flat. This is what it looks like actually when it's knit flat. I took some photos before I seamed them. Yeah, okay. Required 1 ounce of brown, 1/4 ounce of blue single Berlin wool, knitting needles number 14. I'm not very well versed in vintage knitting, especially this old, so I don't know what those mean. I don't know what size or yarn weight they want or what size needles. But the next line is with the brown wool cast on 48 stitches and knit in ribbed knitting, 1 stitch plain, which means knit, and 1 stitch purl for 40 rows. Ironically, for the last like 5 months, I've been trying to perfect a fingerless gloves knitting pattern for myself, and I wanted to have like a base pattern to build off of, and I wound up deciding that using US 1 double pointed needles and casting on 48 stitches, and I also pretty much always do 1x1 ribbing, was perfect for me, so that was really lucky. If that sounds too small for you, I mean, I have small wrists, my hands are pretty like normal, but if that sounds too small for you, this is made in complete 1x1 ribbing, so it does stretch a bit, and you can try to use a stretchy cast on. This pattern also is quite customizable if you can like understand the construction of it. So if you want to make it bigger or smaller, you probably can. Slip the first stitch in every row instead of knitting it. To do so makes a smoother edge. The side where the tag of wool is the side to increase for the thumb. So that's what I did. I slipped the first stitch of every row knitwise, and I did a 1x1 rib for 40 rows. So slip the first stitch, and then I purl the second stitch, and then knit, purl until the end of the row, which you should land on a purl stitch for the last stitch. And then you turn your work and you do the exact same thing. So you slip the first stitch knitwise, then purl, then knit, purl until the end, and end on a purl stitch, which you will be purling your first slip stitch of your first row. And you're just going to do that over and over for 40 rows. Creates this really interesting, lovely little ribbed texture. Having done the 40 rows, make one extra stitch in every row, which begins on the thumb side of the mitten by pricking up the thread that lies directly under the second stitch and knitting it, keeping the work in regular ribs as before. So what I did is slip the first stitch knitwise again, and then I think I did a make one right. Yeah, I did a make one right because I was trying to get my stitches to be straight, and you're starting already on like a left angle. So instead of making a make one left and making my stitch go further to the left, I was trying to kind of counter that. So I don't know what I'm doing with my hand. So slip one knitwise, make one right, and then work in pattern for the rest of the row. Purl, knit, ending on a purl stitch, turning the work, and then you're not doing an increase this row, so you'll slip the first stitch knitwise, purl, knit, purl, and then you'll continue in pattern until the very last stitch. And no matter what the pattern is, you're always going to purl that last stitch. I found that that's easier for keeping the selvage stitch kind of neat. Otherwise the selvage gets twisted, and I was trying to keep it as neat as possible. So when you go and turn your work again, you're going to slip one knitwise, make one right, and then continue in pattern. So whether it's a knit stitch or a purl stitch after that, just knit the same stitch and continue in pattern for the whole row. I hope that makes sense. And you're going to do that for 40 rows so that you increase the thumb. When you have done 40 more rows, there will be 68 stitches on your needle, which there was because I did 40 rows. Now, beginning at the thumb end without any increases, knit 20 stitches still in ribs and leaving the other stitches on the pin. Knit 20 stitches backwards and forwards for 8 rows, and then join on the blue wool. Knit 5 more rows again and cast off. Okay, so just as normal, slipping the first stitch knitwise and then purl and then knit and then for 20 stitches, and then turn your work. And you can put the other stitches on like a stitch holder or thread or something, or not thread, yarn if you want. It wasn't like tight or anything, so I just left my stitches on my needle and continued to basically work that same pattern of slipping the first stitch knitwise and then working in pattern for, what was it, 8 rows. And then you're going to join whatever your contrasting color is. I didn't mean to do like a similar color pattern. It's just what I had available. So I did brown for the body, and then I don't have blue yarn to go with this. I have red, and I love red, so that's what I did. The last stitch of the 8th row, I purl, and I attach my yarn then because I think it just looks neater and cleaner. And so then when I go to do my last 5 rows with the red, I've already attached it in that previous row. Still in pattern, still slipping the first stitch knitwise, and then knitting in 1 by 1 rib for 5 rows, and then cast off. It doesn't necessarily say how to cast off. I just decided to cast off in pattern, and I was hoping that that would help with a little bit of the stretchiness, and also helping keep the edge kind of not leaning to one side or the other, especially because I'm trying to make these both reversible, because one's going to go one way and one's going to go the other way, so I didn't want the cast off edge to be on like a different side for both gloves. With the brown wool, commence again where you divided for the thumb and knit 12 rows, then join on the blue wool and knit 5 more rows and cast off. So you're basically doing the same thing, except there's more stitches and a couple more rows. You want to pick up and knit where the thumb splits in that little bucket. And yeah, you just pick up, and I don't think I slipped the first stitch because I was joining my yarn on the very first row. So I attached my yarn, worked in pattern, and then when I turned, I started slipping the first stitch again. And you knit for 12 rows and then join in your contrasting color. So once again, on the last row, the 12th row, for for that purl stitch, I purled with my new color. And so when I turned it around, I could start knitting. With that new yarn, I knit 5 more rows, keeping in pattern, slipping the first stitch, working 1 by 1 rib, and then cast it off in pattern as well. The other mitten is to be knitted exactly the same. Sew them up, one for the right, other for the left hand. So I seamed it up with a mattress stitch. I've never done that before, but it was very satisfying and fun. And also very easy. I watched a YouTube video on how to do it. So you fold your glove in half and then the thumb gets wrapped around. There are 2 seams that you need to sew up. So you start at the bottom and you sew up and you connect the thumb and you continue sewing up the rest of the hand. And then you go back and you do this little thumb. And then I had honestly quite a lot of ends to weave in, a lot more than I thought, which was a little annoying. And it's kind of hard to weave them in ribbing, and they're all like in the same spot. I'm gonna be honest, some of them I just tied into knots and then cut. You can't see it and I can't feel it, so it's fine. For one glove, I folded it one way and seamed it, and then for the other glove, I folded it in the opposite direction and seamed it. I think it's so cool that, not only is it so cool that it's knit flat, and it has a selvage edge, where the thumb meets, it's just so cool how the stitches just come out. The seam, I believe it should go on the inside. So the seam is on the inside here. The thumb will get wrapped around. It's not like a perfect seam, so I assume it's supposed to be kind of hidden on the inside of the glove, but I'm not sure. It looks like from the pattern, like the illustration, that's how it is. Work 3 rows of herringbone stitch with the blue wool on the ribs, which come in the middle of the back. I kind of just guessed. I don't really know what herringbone stitch is, but I know it's like little X's in the end. So that's just what I did on the back. I put this on first and then I tried to, you know, find where the middle ribs are. It says 3 rows of herringbone stitch. I don't know if that's supposed to be down the entire back, but that person whose pattern that I referenced, they didn't do it that way, I don't believe. They did 3 rows of 6 X's. So that's what I did. On the illustration, it's hard to tell. It doesn't look like the embroidery is supposed to come all the way down, but whatever. It's kind of fine. It's really hard to see anyways, at least like in passing. I love it so much. I love the idea of like being able to not only create something from the past, but like I'm wearing something that more than likely is at least pretty close to like something that somebody of this time would wear. It's so weird. Like somebody wore this before. That's like 100 and something years ago. That's crazy. I love them so much. I think that they're so cool. Definitely want to do more of this. I want to try more knitting patterns like this. I did try another fingerless gloves knitting pattern right after this, and it drove me a little bit insane. So we're going to take a break, but every time that I do make a historical pattern like this, I am going to make a video for it. And then when it comes time for me to do like a finished objects video, which if you are not familiar, I've started to make a video every few months where I show off my finished projects, and I call it finished objects. And so whenever I have something like this that is a historical pattern, I'll probably show it in that video as well, but I will kind of point you to its own video. Yeah, so that's that. I will put all of the links that I can down below. I will write up my pattern as best as I can and put it up on my Patreon for free. That's just where I put stuff like that. So I'll link that down below. So if you want to make these, then you can. It might be a little bit easier to read my pattern, but I'll also link you to like this original pattern, the Ravelry page, all of that. Like I said, you can probably customize this really easily. You can cast on more or less stitches, knit more or less rows, more or less thumb increases, and you can probably make many different sizes of these, which is so cool. And you can like shorten it, you can lengthen it, and yeah, so that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was fun. Yeah, so thank you for watching. Bye.